The Draconis deemed humanity too dangerous for contact. Now they will learn just how dangerous we can be. The imposing voice of Admiral Zortak echoed through the bridge of the massive Draconis warship Thule. He glared at the viewscreen, the crippled human vessel held tight in their tractor beam. "Board them!" Mere minutes ago, Cadet Jesse Ramos had been on a routine training flight near the Draconis border. Then his ship experienced a sudden, catastrophic power failure. Despite his desperate attempts, he couldn't get the systems back online. His ship drifted helplessly into Draconis space. The Thule had decloaked directly in front of him, snaring his vessel like a predator catching prey. Jesse found himself dragged forcefully aboard the warship and into an interrogation room. Zortak loomed over him, his reptilian eyes cold and accusing. "You have violated our borders. Is this part of your invasion plans? Did you think the Draconis would not notice your kind's rapid expansion toward our territory?" Jesse tried to explain the truth, that this was all an accident, a malfunction, but Zortak dismissed his words with a harsh laugh. The Admiral leaned in close, his putrid breath filling Jesse's nostrils. "We have watched you humans with your reckless expansion and dangerous technological advancements. You breed and spread like a plague. The Draconis leadership has decided that your kind are too dangerous to be allowed free rein in the galaxy. You will be made an example of, to show all humans what happens when they cross us." Jesse struggled as the guards grabbed him roughly, dragging him toward the brig. Zortak's parting words chilled him to the bone. "Humanity's uncontested expansion ends here. A reckoning is coming for your species, and the Draconis will put you in your place." As the cell doors slammed shut, leaving Jesse alone with his racing thoughts, the true severity of the situation crashed over him. The Draconis intended war. All of humanity was at risk, and he was trapped behind enemy lines, the only one who knew the truth of their intentions. He had to find a way to escape the Thule, had to warn humanity, had to prevent the coming storm that threatened to consume the galaxy in the fires of war. The fate of his entire species might very well rest on his next actions. Failure was not an option. Jesse looked around his cell, mind racing as he searched for anything that might aid him in his escape. The war might not have started yet, but his battle was just beginning. He would need every ounce of human ingenuity, bravery, and tenacity to succeed in the trials to come. Sitting in his cell, Jesse refused to accept his fate. He had to escape, had to warn humanity about the coming Draconis threat. They thought he would just rot in this cell. They had no idea what humans were capable of. Jesse drew on every scrap of training he could remember. He studied the energy barrier on his cell, looking for fluctuations or weaknesses. He watched the guards patrolling outside like a hawk, noting their routines when they changed shifts. There had to be a vulnerability he could exploit. And then he saw it. For 5 minutes each shift change, there was only one guard on the cell block instead of 2. A brief window where security was halved. That was his chance. Over the next few days, as far as he could tell, Jesse worked to make his move. He scraped a fork against the metal cell walls under the cover of the humming power conduits, slowly filing it into a rudimentary lockpick. He tore a strip from his coveralls, using a scrap of sharp metal to cut it into a long ribbon, a potential garrote or binding if needed. Finally, the pieces were in place. Jesse waited until halfway through the solo guard's shift, then made his move. In a swift motion, he jammed his makeshift lockpick into the control panel by his cell's energy barrier. Sparks flew, and the force field sputtered out. Jesse sprinted past the startled guard, slamming his palm into the control panel on the other side, to close the barrier behind him, then disappeared into the dimly lit hall before the guard could sound the alarm. The ship was a maze, but Jesse stuck to the maintenance tubes and access ways, trying to stay out of sight. His mental map of the Thule was hazy, pieced together from brief glimpses during his initial capture. But he knew the hangar bay was his best bet. Maybe he could steal a shuttle, slip away before anyone noticed. Alarms blared through the halls. Red lights strobed and a voice barked over the intercom in Draconis. Jesse didn't need a translator to know they'd discovered his escape. He heard the heavy thud of boots on metal, troopers marching through the halls, searching for him. The hangar entrance was just ahead. This was it. Jesse's heart hammered in his chest as he crept up to the door controls, and his stomach dropped. The hangar was swarming with activity, soldiers on high alert. Fighters and shuttles sat in neat rows, but they were locked down with security clamps. Technicians and guards bustled between them. There was no way Jesse could steal one unnoticed. Despair clawed at him, but Jesse pushed it down. He couldn't give up. The comms array, if he could just get a message out to the nearest human ship or colony, warn them. Jesse backtracked, heading up to the communications deck, sticking to cover. He slipped into the first comms room he found and sealed the door behind him. The interface blinked in alien runes, but the controls were similar enough to human models. Jesse got to work, slicing through layer after layer of security, trying to piggyback his warning onto an outgoing signal. "Mayday, Mayday. This is Cadet Jesse Ramos of the Terran Fleet, transmitting on all frequencies," Jesse said, trying to keep his voice steady as he recorded his message log. "I've been captured by Draconis forces. They plan to—" "I knew you would attempt something foolish, human," Zortak growled. "You have accomplished nothing except revealing your kind's hostile intentions. No peaceful species would turn to sabotage and espionage so quickly." Jesse's eyes darted to the door as he heard shouts from the hall beyond, the heavy tramp of approaching troops. The door shook as they began trying to force it open. He was out of time. "Your message has been sent," Zortak continued with a vicious smile, "but not to your human brethren. I allowed it to transmit to Draconis High Command as proof of human aggression. As of this moment, the Draconis have declared your species a threat to the stability of our star nation. A state of war now exists between our peoples." The door blasted open, and Draconis soldiers boiled into the room, weapons leveled at Jesse. He raised his hands in surrender, knowing he had no other choice. They dragged him before Zortak on the Thul's bridge, forcing him to kneel. "How you will live out your days in a Draconis prison," the Admiral hissed, looming over Jesse, "and your species will soon understand the price of provoking the galactic hegemony." As Jesse pushed himself up on shaking arms, the enormity of what had just happened crashed over him. He hadn't just failed to escape. His actions, the message Zortak had allowed to send as a pretext, had given the Draconis an excuse for war. Jesse collapsed onto the hard metal bench, burying his face in his hands. He hadn't just doomed himself to rot in an alien prison. He may have just doomed his entire species to a war they didn't yet even know was coming. The transport ship shuddered as it entered the asteroid's thin atmosphere. Jesse stumbled, his wrists chafing against the heavy manacles. A Draconis guard shoved him forward with the butt of a plasma rifle. "Move, human scum," the guard hissed. Jesse stepped onto the landing pad, squinting in the harsh glare of floodlights. A massive structure loomed before him, the high-security Draconis prison. Guards flanked him on all sides as he was marched through a series of airlocks and security checkpoints. In the processing center, Jesse's prison uniform was unceremoniously tossed at him. "Put it on," a bored-looking Draconis clerk ordered. As Jesse changed, he took in his surroundings. The walls were bare metal, cameras watching from every angle. Other new prisoners, a mix of species, but mostly Draconis, shuffled through the intake procedures. Armed guards stood at attention, their scaled fingers resting on trigger guards. "Name and species for the record," the clerk demanded. "Jesse Ramos, human." The Draconis' eyes narrowed. "Human, eh? You'll wish you'd never been born by the time you're done here." Jesse said nothing, refusing to rise to the bait. He wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Days blurred together as Jesse adjusted to prison life. Every morning he was roused from his cramped cell and herded with other prisoners to the mines. The work was backbreaking, hours of swinging pickaxes and hauling ore carts under the watchful eyes of trigger-happy guards. During one shift, Jesse found himself working alongside another human prisoner. The man was older, his face weathered and scarred. "Zach!" The man grunted by way of introduction. "What's your story, kid?" Between swings of his pickaxe, Jesse gave Zack a brief rundown of his situation. The older man listened intently, then leaned in close. "Listen up," Zack whispered. "I've been in this hellhole for years, got connections, know the layout. If you're serious about getting out of here, stick close." Before Jesse could reply, the crack of a plasma whip split the air. "No talking!" a guard roared. Zack and Jesse fell silent, but exchanged meaningful glances. A seed of hope took root in Jesse's chest. Weeks passed. Jesse and Zack spoke when they could, planning in hushed tones. Then came the day of the cave-in. It started with a low rumble. Dust rained from the cavern ceiling. Then a massive section of rock gave way with a thunderous crack. Prisoners and guards alike scrambled for safety as chunks of stone crashed down. In the chaos, Jesse felt a hand grip his arm. Zack. "Now's our chance," the ex-smuggler hissed. "Follow me." "Almost there," Zack panted. "Used to be a secondary hangar down here before they expanded the prison. If we're lucky—" "Holy shit," Jesse breathed. "Can we fly it?" They set to work, Zack's knowledge of ships proving invaluable. It took hours of jury rigging and cursing, but finally the engines sputtered to life. "Moment of truth," Zack said as they strapped in. "If we can't slip past the sensor grid, we're dead." Jesse's hands shook as he gripped the controls. With agonizing slowness, they eased out of the hangar and into open space. Alarms blared in the distance. Their absence had been noticed. "There," Jesse pointed at a gap in the patrol coverage. They dove for it, weaving between asteroids. A tense hour passed before Zack finally relaxed. "We're clear," he announced. "Where to now, kid?" Jesse's face hardened. "We can't run. Not with what I know about the Draconis plans. We need to warn the Alliance." Zack cursed colorfully. "You're crazy, but you're right. Setting course for the nearest human outpost." As they sped toward Alliance space, Jesse allowed himself a moment of relief. But he knew the real fight was just beginning. Somehow, he had to stop this war before it consumed the galaxy. As they sped toward Alliance space, Jesse knew their brief moment of relief was over. The real fight was just beginning. Jesse's covert team boarded their stealth ship, the Phantom, preparing to cross into dangerous Draconis territory. The ship's cloaking systems hummed to life as they slipped past the border patrols. "Asteroid field dead ahead," Zack called from the pilot's seat. "Hang on, this is going to get bumpy." The Phantom weaved through a maze of spinning rocks and debris. Proximity alarms blared as massive boulders scraped past the hull. Jesse white-knuckled the armrests of his chair. "Steady," Zack muttered, eyes locked on the sensors. With a final gut-wrenching turn, they cleared the field. "We're through, setting course for the Thragos system." Their destination came into view, a pockmarked moon orbiting a gas giant. As they touched down in a shadowy ravine, Jesse briefed the team. "Remember, we're here to plant false intel in the Draconis shipyards, but first we need schematics. Zack and I will meet our contact. The rest of you prep for infiltration." In a dingy cantina on Thragos, Jesse and Zack waited. A hunched figure in a grimy cloak shuffled up to their table. "You cracks?" Jesse asked. The alien's eyes darted around before he slipped into the booth. "You have payment?" Zack slid over a credit chit. Crax's spindly fingers snatched it up. "Schematics," the informant rasped, passing Jesse a data stick. "Now we're done." Back at the ship, Jesse's tech expert Vin pored over the stolen plans. "Good news, I can use this to fabricate Draconis worker IDs. We'll walk right in." Disguised in ill-fitting uniforms, the team approached the shipyard's security gate. Jesse's pulse raced as the guards scanned their forged credentials. "Cleared for entry," the Draconis soldier grunted. They made their way to a deserted computer hub. While Vin uploaded the virus, Jesse and Zack stood watch. "Hey, you there!" a voice barked. A Draconis officer strode towards them, eyes narrowed. "I don't recognize you. Let me see your—" In a flash, Zack tackled the guard. There was a brief scuffle before Jesse helped pin him down. They quickly bound and gagged the unconscious Draconis, stuffing him in a supply closet. "Vin, how much longer?" Jesse hissed. "Almost got it." Vin's fingers flew over the keyboard. "Virus is uploaded. Now for the fleet data." Alarms suddenly blared through the facility. "Intruder alert. All personnel report to stations." "And I'm to go," Jesse shouted. They sprinted down the corridor as plasma bolts sizzled past. Diving into a maintenance shaft, they scrambled through the cramped tunnels. A stray shot caught Vin in the leg. He stumbled with a cry of pain. They emerged into a hangar bay and dashed for their ship. As the Phantom's engines roared to life, Draconis troops poured in, weapons blazing. The ship rocketed out of the bay, weaving through the asteroid field once more. Pursuit ships gave chase but couldn't match the Phantom's stealth systems. Back on Thragos, they sought refuge in the seedy underbelly of a sprawling junkyard. A shady back-alley doctor patched up Vin's leg, while Jesse transmitted the stolen data to Alliance Command. "It worked," Jesse said, studying the incoming reports. "The Draconis fleet is splitting up, chasing our fake deployments." Their celebration was cut short by an incoming transmission. A haggard face appeared on the console. "This is Operative Soren," the man said urgently. "My cover's blown. Draconis closing in. Need immediate extraction." Jesse looked at his battered team. They'd accomplished their mission, but could they risk one more dangerous operation? Jesse and his team huddled around the flickering holographic display aboard the Phantom. The stolen Draconis intelligence scrolled past, a jumble of alien text and schematics. Zack snorted. "You're not seriously considering hitting that fortress, are you? It'd be suicide." "It's also their primary command hub for this sector," Soren interjected. "If we could take it out..." He transmitted their findings to Alliance Command, outlining a daring plan to infiltrate and sabotage the station from within. The response was swift and unequivocal. Too risky. But as they debated their next move, a priority alert flashed across their sensors. Vin's eyes widened. "A supply convoy, heading for Omega-9. This could be our chance." Jesse made the call. They'd piggyback on the convoy, using stolen Draconis codes to slip past the station's outer defenses. The Phantom glided silently into formation with the lumbering supply ships. Jesse's palm was slick with sweat as they approached the massive station. Gun emplacements bristled from its surface, and swarms of fighters patrolled its perimeter. "Incoming transmission," Vin reported. "They're hailing us for identification." Jesse took a deep breath and keyed the comm. "This is Repair Shuttle Delta 7, responding to Work Order 3391. A tense moment passed before a gruff voice responded. "Proceed to Docking Bay 12 for inspection." They touched down in a cavernous hangar. Jesse led his team down the ramp, each step feeling like it might be their last. A towering Draconis in ornate armor strode towards them, flanked by armed guards. Jesse kept his voice steady. "Scheduled maintenance on the reactor cooling systems, sir." Grorak's eyes narrowed. "I wasn't informed of any such work." Jesse's mind raced. "It's a last-minute request from engineering. The coolant pressure's been fluctuating. We can pull up the work order if—" "That won't be necessary," Grorak cut him off. "Proceed, but I'll be watching you closely." They passed through the security checkpoint, Jesse's heart pounding. Once clear, he turned to his team. "We don't have much time. Zack, Soren, create a distraction. Draw security away from the reactor core. Vin, you're with me." Jesse and Vin made their way through twisting corridors, following the station schematics they'd memorized. They reached a sealed bulkhead, and Vin got to work, fingers flying over his datapad. The door slid open with a hiss, revealing the pulsing heart of the station's reactor. Jesse stood watch as Vin connected to a nearby terminal, uploading the virus that would bring the station to its knees. A plasma bolt sizzled past Jesse's ear. He spun, weapon raised, to see Grorak charging towards them, flanked by security forces. "Intruders," Grorak roared. "Kill them!" Jesse dove for cover, returning fire. The air filled with the acrid smell of ozone as bolts crisscrossed the chamber. How much longer? Jesse shouted over the din. 30 seconds, Vin called back. Jesse popped up, squeezing off another burst. His shot caught Grorak in the shoulder, sending the security chief stumbling back with a roar of pain. It's done, Vin yelled. They sprinted from the reactor core as alarms began to blare throughout the station. The deck beneath their feet shuddered as systems began to fail. All units converge on Hangar Bay, Jesse ordered into his comm. We're getting out of here. They fought their way through panicked crowds of Draconis crew members. Bulkheads groaned and emergency lights flashed. In the hangar, they found Zack and Soren already engaged in a firefight with security forces. There, Zack shouted, gesturing to a sleek Draconis shuttle. Our ticket out of here. They piled in, Jesse taking the controls. The shuttle rocketed out of the bay just as a massive explosion tore through the station's superstructure. Vin's hit, Soren called from the back. It's bad. Jesse pushed the engines to their limit, racing to outrun the expanding ball of plasma and debris that had once been Station Omega-9. The shuttle bucked as the shockwave hit, but Jesse held it steady. As they sped away from the crippled Draconis stronghold, Jesse allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction. They'd struck a decisive blow, but at a heavy cost, and he knew the real fight was nowhere near the end. Jesse stood at the helm of the Phantom, his eyes fixed on the holographic display of Corvin Prime. The asteroid's craggy surface loomed before them, a fortress of rock and metal hiding unimaginable dangers. We're approaching the outer marker, Zack announced, his fingers dancing across the control panel. Transmitting our cargo hauler IDs, now. A tense silence filled the bridge as they waited for a response. After what felt like an eternity, a gruff voice crackled over the comm. Hauler Delta 9, you are cleared for approach. Proceed to Docking Bay 17. The team exchanged nervous glances as Zack guided the ship into a cavernous hangar carved from the asteroid's heart. As the docking clamps engaged, Jesse took a deep breath. Remember, we're just another crew of miners. Keep your heads down and stick to the plan. They disembarked, shouldering packs laden with mining equipment and hidden gear. The hangar bustled with activity, workers loading ore, mechanics repairing equipment, and the occasional Draconis overseer barking orders. A burly foreman approached, datapad in hand. You the new crew? He grunted, eyeing them suspiciously. For days they toiled in the cramped, sweltering tunnels. Muscles ached as they swung pickaxes and loaded ore carts, but with each shift they inched closer to their target. As they neared a junction in the tunnels, Zack stumbled, accidentally triggering his mining laser. The beam struck a support strut, and with a deafening rumble, the tunnel began to collapse. Cave in, Jesse shouted. Everyone out! In the chaos that followed, the team slipped away, using the avalanche as cover. They sprinted through twisting passageways, guided by Vin's hacked schematics. Suddenly, voices echoed from around a corner. Jesse held up a fist, signaling the team to halt. 2 Draconis guards rounded the bend, weapons raised. Hey, you're not supposed to be... Jesse didn't let him finish. He lunged forward, driving his shoulder into the first guard's midsection. As they tumbled to the ground, Soren engaged the second, a swift kick disarming him. In seconds, both guards lay unconscious. Jesse's heart raced as he dragged the bodies into a side passage. We need to move, fast. They pressed on, the tunnel walls seeming to close in with each step. Finally, they reached a heavily reinforced door, the entrance to the R&D bunker. Vin plugged his datapad into the access panel, fingers flying across the screen. Almost got it. The door slid open with a pneumatic hiss. They slipped inside, finding themselves in a sterile white corridor. Alarm klaxons blared in the distance. All right, split up, Jesse ordered. Zack, Soren, create some chaos. Vin, find that data core. I'll secure our exit strategy. Intruder, one shouted, raising his weapon. Jesse dove for cover as plasma bolts seared the air. He returned fire, his shots finding their mark. But more guards poured in, forcing him to retreat. He sprinted down a side corridor. alarms blaring. A stray shot grazed his arm and he bit back a cry of pain. Ducking into an empty lab, he took a moment to catch his breath and assess the situation. His calm crackled to life. "Jesse!" It was Zack. "I've rigged the reactor. This place is gonna blow in 20 minutes. "Copy that," Jesse replied. "Vin, status?" "Data downloaded," came the response. "But I've found something else. There's a prototype in Lab 7. We need to grab it." Jesse's mind raced. They were running out of time. "On my way, everyone, converge on Lab 7. We're getting out of here." He fought his way through the facility, every step a battle. By the time he reached Lab 7, his uniform was scorched and his lungs burned from exertion. Inside, he found his team engaged in a firefight with Draconis security. In the center of the room sat a sleek, ominous device, the super-weapon prototype. "Cover me," Jesse shouted. He sprinted for the prototype, plasma bolts whizzing past his head. With a grunt, he hefted the device onto his shoulder. "Let's move," he ordered. They retreated through the collapsing facility, the prototype weighing Jesse down. Zack led the way, guiding them to a small hangar where they'd stashed a hijacked transport. As they piled aboard, the first explosions rocked the bunker. Zack gunned the engines and they shot out of the hangar just as a massive fireball engulfed it. They sped through the tunnels, debris raining down around them. With a final burst of speed, they broke free of the asteroid, racing towards the waiting Phantom. Once aboard their ship, Jesse slumped against the bulkhead, exhaustion overtaking him, but there was no time to rest. "Vin, transmit that data to Alliance Command," he ordered. "We need to get this prototype to our scientists ASAP." As they plotted a course out of Draconis space, Jesse knew their victory would be short-lived. The enemy would retaliate, and soon. But for now, they'd bought humanity a fighting chance. His mind was already racing, planning their next move. They had to stay ahead of the Draconis. The fate of the stars depended on it. Jesse's eyes widened as the urgent transmission from Alliance Command flashed across the Phantom's main display. Long-range probes had detected a massive Draconis fleet mobilizing, its target clear, Kepler's reach. "This is bad," Zack muttered, leaning in to study the data. "If they take Kepler's reach..." Jesse paced the bridge, mind racing. They had to act fast, but what could one small team do against a force of that magnitude? "We need to slow them down," he said finally. "Buy time for reinforcements to reach Kepler's reach." "How?" Vin asked. "We can't exactly take on an entire invasion fleet." A reckless plan began to form in Jesse's mind. "We don't fight them, we infiltrate them." His team stared at him in disbelief as he outlined his audacious strategy. Using their stolen Draconis codes and identities, they would stow away aboard one of the massive troop transports, then sabotage the fleet from within. Hours later, Jesse's heart pounded as they approached the sprawling Draconis staging area. Countless warships filled the void, a sea of gleaming metal and pulsing engines. Their stolen shuttle weaved through the chaos, transmitting forged deployment orders. "Shuttle TD-249, proceed to Docking Bay 7. A bored voice crackled over the comm. They touched down in a cavernous hangar teeming with activity. Draconis troops marched in perfect formation, while loading crews swarmed over towering stacks of supplies and munitions. Jesse led his team down the ramp, every muscle tense as they joined the flow of soldiers boarding the transport. A burly Draconis sergeant barely glanced at their IDs before waving them through. Once aboard, they split up to avoid suspicion. Jesse made his way through cramped corridors, surrounded by the acrid smell of too many bodies in too small a space. He tapped his communicator twice, the prearranged signal that he'd reached his position. In the bowels of the ship, Vin's fingers flew across his datapad as he interfaced with the transport systems. A bead of sweat rolled down his forehead as he worked to introduce the cloaking virus without triggering any alarms. Several decks away, Zack and Soren created their diversion. A malfunctioning cargo loader toppled, spilling crates across the bay floor. As security teams rushed to contain the chaos, Jesse slipped into a maintenance shaft. He crawled through claustrophobic ducts, following Vin's directions to a crucial data node. Just as he connected the upload device, shouting echoed from below. "Intruder alert, all security teams. Commence deck-by-deck sweeps." Jesse's blood ran cold. He dropped from the duct, landing in a crouch as an officer and 2 guards rounded the corner. Jesse didn't let him finish. He launched himself forward, driving his shoulder into the officer's solar plexus. As the Draconis doubled over, Jesse spun, catching one guard with a vicious elbow strike. The second guard raised his weapon, but Jesse was faster. He grabbed the guard's arm, twisting it until bones snapped. A quick chop to the neck dropped the Draconis. Breathing hard, Jesse surveyed the unconscious aliens. He dragged them into a storage closet, praying the virus upload had finished. "Vin, status," he hissed into his comm. They regrouped at a predetermined rally point, then made their way to the shuttle bay. Alarms blared as they commandeered a sleek assault craft. As they rocketed away from the transport, the first signs of chaos bloomed. Ships veered wildly off course, their navigational systems scrambled. Frantic communications filled the airwaves as commanders tried to regain control. Jesse grinned fiercely as he piloted their stolen shuttle through the disarray. Using the fleet's own comm frequencies, they launched precision strikes against key targets. A massive munitions freighter erupted in a spectacular fireball as their falsified orders sent it careening into a formation of fighters. Elsewhere, corvettes and destroyers fired on phantom targets, their sensors feeding them false data. What had been a finely tuned war machine devolved into pandemonium. The invasion timetable lay in tatters as ships collided or jumped to incorrect coordinates. As they sped away from the snarled fleet, Jesse allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. They'd bought the Alliance precious time, but he knew the reprieve wouldn't last forever. The Draconis would regroup, and when they did, their fury would be unmatched. His team looked to him expectantly, awaiting their next move. Jesse's mind raced, searching for a way to press their advantage before the window of opportunity slammed shut. Jesse's eyes narrowed as he studied the tactical display aboard their stealth ship. The Draconis invasion fleet loomed at the edge of the Kepler's Reach system, a swarm of deadly warships poised to strike. "We bought some time, but it's not enough," Vin reported, his fingers dancing across the control panel. "Alliance intel says they'll breach the outer defenses within hours." Zack banged his head against the bulkhead. "Damn it, all that work and they're still coming." Jesse paced the bridge, mind racing. They needed a way to multiplying the chaos they'd sown. His gaze settled on the largest blip on the display, the Draconis flagship. "There," he said, pointing. "We take out their command and control, the whole invasion falls apart." Soren's eyes widened. "You want to hit the flagship? That's suicide." "Maybe not," Jesse replied, a plan forming. "We still have those Draconis codes if we can get aboard." The team huddled around the tactical display, hammering out the details of their audacious scheme. Hours later, their stealth ship slipped through the Draconis fighter screen, transmitting forged repair crew credentials. Jesse's heart pounded as they approached the titanic dreadnought. Its hull stretched for kilometers, jam-packed with weapon emplacements. A cavernous hangar yawned open, and their ship glided inside. As they touched down, Jesse surveyed the bustling hangar. Draconis crews swarmed over fighters and shuttles, preparing for the impending assault. "All right, let's move," Jesse ordered. "Stick to the plan." They split up, Jesse and Zack heading deeper into the ship while Soren and Vin made for the computer core. Jesse's stolen Draconis uniform felt stiff and alien as they navigated twisting corridors. Suddenly, alarms blared. Zack grinned. "That's our cue. Give 'em hell, boss." As Zack peeled off to wreak havoc with the life support systems, Jesse pressed on toward the bridge. He rounded a corner and came face to face with a Draconis security team. Jesse's hand inched toward his concealed weapon. "At ease, soldier," he said, activating the identity transcoder, special assignment from Admiral Urath himself. The guard's posture shifted as Jesse's stolen credentials registered. "My apologies, sir. Proceed." Heart racing, Jesse continued his ascent through the massive ship. He reached a heavily armored door, the entrance to the Combat Information Center. Taking a deep breath, he swiped his stolen access card. The door slid open, revealing a cavernous chamber filled with holographic displays and bustling crew. At the center stood a towering Draconis, Admiral Urath himself. Jesse strode forward, every muscle tense. As he approached, Urath turned, his alien features twisting in confusion. His words were cut off as Jesse dove for cover. Plasma bolts seared the air as Draconis guards opened fire. Jesse returned fire, his shots finding their mark even as he scrambled for better position. The bridge erupted in chaos as systems began to fail. Lights flickered and displays went dark. Jesse used the confusion to fight his way across the command deck, ducking behind consoles as he closed in on Urath. A stray shot grazed Jesse's arm, and he hissed in pain. Pinned down behind a tactical display, he reached for the EMP device. With a silent prayer, he activated it. "We're in," Vin's voice rang out, "seizing control of critical systems now." Urath roared in rage as his mighty vessel began to turn against him. "What have you done?" Jesse rose, weapon trained on the Admiral. "I've ended your invasion. Now get your forces out of this system before I blow this ship to atoms." The dreadnought shuddered as explosions rocked its superstructure. Jesse's team fought a running battle back to the hangar bay, Draconis troops in hot pursuit. They piled into their ship just as the flagship systems cascaded into total failure. As they rocketed away from the dying Leviathan, Jesse allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction. The Draconis invasion force fractured, its ships scattering in disarray. But even as human reinforcements swooped in to mop up the remaining invaders, Jesse knew their troubles were just the beginning. The Draconis would be back, and next time, they'd be ready for humanity's tricks. They needed a true game-changer, and fast. Jesse stared at the tactical display, his teeth clenched as he processed the latest intelligence reports. The holographic projections showed an overwhelming sea of red, Draconis ships massing for a devastating counterstrike. "They just keep coming," Zack muttered, voicing the team's shared despair. Jesse ran a hand through his hair, mind racing. They needed a game-changer, something to halt the Draconis war machine in its tracks. His eyes narrowed, and as an audacious plan took shape. "We hit them where it hurts," he said, zooming in on a distant star system. "The Corvin shipyards." Soren's eyes widened. "That's suicide. It's the most heavily fortified facility in hegemony space." Hours later, they huddled around a holographic schematic of the shipyards, hammering out the details of their insane scheme. Using salvaged Draconis tech and painstakingly crafted false credentials, they would pose as a replacement engineering crew. Weeks passed in agonizing confinement as they smuggled themselves aboard a lumbering Draconis transport. The team endured cramped, pitch-black compartments, barely large enough to lie down in. The air grew thick and stale, every breath a struggle. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they felt the ship shudder as it docked at Corvin. Jesse's heart raced as they emerged, blinking in the harsh light of the cavernous hangar bay. A Draconis officer approached, datapad in hand. "Engineering crew TD-879, he barked. "Affirmative," Jesse replied, willing his voice not to shake as he presented their forged manifest. The officer's alien eyes narrowed as he scrutinized the documents. Jesse felt sweat trickle down his spine. After an agonizing moment, the Draconis nodded curtly. "Proceed to Sector 7, Fabrication Bay C," he ordered. "You have much work to do." They split up, each member heading to their assigned posts. Zack and Soren made their way to a sprawling production floor filled with half-assembled warships. They set to work, fingers flying across control panels as they introduced subtle flaws into hull integrity fields and weapon systems. In a secure server room, Vin's brow furrowed in concentration as he interfaced with the shipyard's data core. Line by line, he corrupted critical schematics, ensuring future production runs would be fatally flawed. Jesse found himself assigned to a research lab, surrounded by Draconis scientists poring over weapon designs. His eyes locked on a striking female Draconis, clearly a high-ranking researcher. Swallowing his revulsion, he approached with a disarming smile. "Dr. Vexara," he said, reading her name badge, "I was hoping you could assist me with accessing the phase cannon schematics." "Engineer Kravix," Jesse replied smoothly. "New transfer." Over the next few days, Jesse carefully cultivated a rapport with Vexara, feigning interest in her work. His skin crawled each time he forced himself to laugh at her jokes or brush against her arm, but it paid off when she finally granted him access to her personal workstation. As Jesse downloaded critical intel, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. On the production floor, Zack cursed as fabricators ground to a halt, crippled by cascading virus outbreaks. Jesse's blood ran cold as he overheard frantic communications. Their cover was blown. He sprinted through twisting corridors, desperate to reach the rendezvous point. Rounding a corner, he came face to face with a Draconis security officer. Jesse didn't hesitate. He lashed out, catching the guard's throat in a vicious strike. As the Draconis crumpled, Jesse grabbed his sidearm and ran. He had almost reached the meeting point when a thunderous explosion rocked the entire facility. Klaxons wailed as fires erupted throughout the munitions sector. In the ensuing chaos, Jesse finally linked up with his team. Their brief moment of relief was shattered as a towering Draconis rounded the corner, flanked by heavily armed troops. Jesse's blood ran cold as he recognized the elaborate insignia, Commander Vrock, head of shipyard security. Jesse raised his stolen weapon. "It's over, Vrock. Your shipyards are crippled." Vrock's alien features twisted in rage. He lunged forward with inhuman speed, batting Jesse's gun aside. They grappled furiously, crashing into walls and equipment. Jesse felt ribs crack under a devastating blow, but he fought on, buying time for his team to complete the upload. Just as Vrock's clawed hand closed around Jesse's throat, a barrage of plasma fire forced the Draconis back. Zack had arrived, laying down suppressing fire. "Jesse, come on," Zack shouted. "Vin's got our ride." They sprinted through smoke-filled corridors, alarms blaring and steel groaning as the facility tore itself apart. They emerged onto a construction gantry where a sleek destroyer hung suspended, only partially complete. Vin's voice crackled over their comms. "Hope you're ready for a bumpy ride." The gantry shuddered as the destroyer's engines roared to life. Draconis troops poured onto the platform, energy weapons sizzling past their heads. Jesse dove through the airlock, the others right behind him. "Punch it!" he yelled. The unfinished warship tore free of its moorings in a shriek of tortured metal. As they rocketed away from the disintegrating shipyards, Jesse allowed himself a fierce grin. They dealt the Draconis a crippling blow, one that would echo throughout the war. But he knew the fight was a long way to go. As hegemony interceptors closed in, Jesse stared at the tactical display, his face hardened tight. The sea of red icons representing the Draconis fleet formations sent a chill down his spine. They had dealt the enemy a devastating blow at Corvin, but it wasn't enough. Not by a long shot. "We bought some time," Soren said, voicing what they all knew. "But they'll be back and they'll be pissed." Jesse nodded grimly. "We need to hit them again, harder this time." He zoomed the display out, revealing a heavily fortified region of space. The core systems of the Draconis hegemony glowed with an ominous crimson light. "There," Jesse said, tapping the hologram. "We strike at the heart of their war machine, the world surrounding Draca Prime itself." "Exactly why they won't expect us to try," Jesse replied. He turned to Vin. "What did we get from that Draconis defector?" Vin's fingers danced across his datapad. "Quite a bit, actually, including access codes for a major supply convoy headed to Torkatha." Jesse leaned in, studying the industrial hellscape that was Torkatha. Refineries belched toxic fumes into a permanently night-dark sky. Massive factories churned out munitions and war material around the clock. "Perfect," Jesse said. "We slip in with the convoy, gather intel, and find a way to cripple their operations." When they finally emerged on Torkatha, Jesse's legs nearly buckled. The air tasted of ash and corrosion. All around them, slaves and drones toiled endlessly, watched by harsh-faced Draconis overseers. "This way," Soren whispered, leading them through winding alleys of rusted metal and decaying infrastructure. They made contact with a small group of dissidents, slaves who had managed to preserve a spark of rebellion, despite generations of oppression. From them, Jesse's team learned of a heavily fortified command bunker, controlling fleet deployments throughout the sector. Vin and Soren set to work, fingers flying across stolen datapads as they crafted insidious virus code. Meanwhile, Zack vanished into Torkatha's criminal underbelly, returning days later with a pack full of explosives and a haunted look in his eyes. When the time came, Jesse and Zack crouched in the shadow of a massive refinery stack. In the distance, the command bunker's armored dome gleamed dully in the muddy light. Across Torkatha, alarms began to blare. Explosions rocked refineries and assembly plants. Toxic clouds billowed into the sky as containment systems failed. Jesse watched Draconis security forces scramble in panic, racing to contain the spreading chaos. "Let's move," he ordered. They sprinted across the blasted no-man's land surrounding the bunker. Automated turrets swiveled to track them. But the virus had done its work. Their targeting systems were scrambled, shots going wild. Inside, they fought a running battle through twisting corridors. Jesse's stolen Draconis sidearm barked again and again as they pushed deeper into the facility. At last, they reached the central data core. Jesse's hands flew across the control panel, downloading critical fleet data, even as Zack planted charges throughout the room. "We're out of time," Zack shouted over the wail of alarms. They ran, explosive detonations nipping at their heels. But as they neared the exit, a secondary blast from ruptured fuel lines brought down tons of rubble. Jesse found himself pinned, agony lancing through his body. Zack hesitated, torn. But another explosion rocked the facility, and he fled with a last anguished look at his trapped comrade. Consciousness faded in and out for Jesse. When he came to, he found himself still trapped, the taste of blood in his mouth. Beside him lay the broken body of a Draconis commander, a datapad clutched in its lifeless hand. Fighting waves of pain, Jesse activated the device. His eyes widened in horror as he saw the hegemony's plans unfold before him. Their main strike force was already assembled, poised to annihilate the remaining human worlds in one fell swoop. With trembling fingers, Jesse accessed the Draconis hypernet using the dead commander's codes. He had one last card to play. As his vision began to dim, Jesse triggered a cascading data overload that spread like wildfire through the hegemony's communications network. Across Draconis space, carefully laid plans dissolved into chaos. Supply chains fractured. Fleets lost cohesion. The mighty war machine of the hegemony ground to a stuttering halt. Aboard their stealth ship, Zack and the others watched in stunned disbelief as status reports flooded in. Jesse's risky move had worked beyond their wildest hopes. The Draconis offensive had collapsed before it could even begin. But as the magnitude of their victory sank in, Zack felt no joy, only a deep, gnawing ache for the friend they had left behind. Tears streamed down his face as he vowed to finish what Jesse had started, to drive the hegemony back once and for all. The war was far from finished, but in that moment humanity had proven that even in the darkest hour, hope could never truly be extinguished. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.